Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me again here on Impact Media. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Nausheena Hussain, and she's the co-founder and executive director of an innovative platform to empower women in her community known as Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment. She is dedicated in building a movement to address leadership development, increase community engagement, and create a philanthropic legacy for change. So today, she's going to address the importance of owning your story and using your voice to bring a different perspective to the conversation in order to drive impact and break stereotypes. She shares her experience and successes in achieving this impact, empowering Muslim women, and how increasing political participation impacts economic empowerment. So I'm so excited to have her here today. Nausheena, how are you?
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me on today. I've been, busy with watching the impeachment trial as well as doing a lot of social justice activist work. So it's a good day, and I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. So why don't you start just by explaining what RISE is? How did it start? How did you come to create this organization?
Yeah, so RISE started, the idea sort of was percolating back in like 2014, 2015, and it was right on the onset of the 2016 election that we were incorporated. So we just actually celebrated our 5-year birthday anniversary just 2 weeks ago, which was really exciting. But the reason that we were established was because there was just a constant negative narrative around who Muslim women were. I wasn't seeing a lot of political activism in my community, and really just a rise in Islamophobia and hate crimes against Muslims in general. And so in September of 2015, I gathered a group of Muslim women, and we had this conversation about what does civic engagement mean, and what is leadership, and what does leadership look like for Muslim women. And what I came to realize was there are some really amazing Muslim women in our communities doing fantastic work that are either getting unnoticed or somebody's taking credit for their work. And so we established this platform to really amplify the voice and power of Muslim women. We are here to do that through storytelling, leadership development, and civic engagement. And so we've been around really making an impact in our communities, and we are building that political power and continuing to make the world a better place.
And it's wonderful to hear. And I want the audience to get a sense of you chose to use storytelling as a primary format for making this change happen. And I want to know, how is storytelling, or why is storytelling so powerful, and how does it have such an impact?
So, Mike, I want you to think about the first time you saw or read a book where the main character looked like you. Because I did not see a character that looked like me until I was well into my 30s. And in fact, that book was called Does My Head Look Big in This? Which is about a young girl starting to wear the hijab, or the Islamic covering. And that was really sad for me to see that it took so long for me to find myself in a story. And what we realize is that, there's a lot of power in who controls the narrative, who is telling the story, especially because we see that most of the narrative around who Muslim women are was being told by somebody else. And it was always in this realm of Islamophobia, right? Muslim women were either oppressed or we were the victims of hate crimes. And there was never positive stories about Muslim women. And so storytelling for us was really, to challenge how stories are told about us. And you can't be telling stories about us without us. And, I think about like how history is told through the eyes of the victor, right? So I'm sure you're familiar with what has been happening in Minneapolis for the past few months and the past few years around just police brutality and the murder of George Floyd. And when the uprising happened, the story was all about how there was looting and rioting, a real negative narrative around Black Lives Matter. And it was because somebody else was telling that story. And so we want to make sure that there is the right story, a truthful story, and an honest story by telling our stories ourselves. And so that's why we launched the Muslim Sheroes of Minnesota Storytelling Project. It's a multimedia storytelling project, which, you know, shows the everyday heroic stories of Muslim women in Minnesota that are doing phenomenal work and bringing change to their communities.
And we're seeing this change happen by access to political participation becoming real for Muslim women. So can you talk about, and you know, we briefly spoke about this earlier, about this is a sustained effort over years, but can you talk to us about how that's taking shape, or how that's transpiring?
So I asked this question of, like, how can I be what I cannot see? And when I don't see somebody that looks like me in positions of power where decisions are being made, it sends this message that this is not for me. It otherizes us and makes us feel like we're not part of this community or this society or citizens of this country, right? And so when we began our storytelling project, we wanted to also highlight Muslim women who are politically engaged, who are active in their communities, that are participating in all the many different ways of civic engagement. So usually we hear about civic engagement of voting or running for office, and we don't know what happens in between. And we started to showcase a lot of stories around Muslim women becoming election judges, Muslim women becoming commissioners in their cities, Muslim women becoming delegates to their political party conventions. And so when we see ourselves participating in that way, we start to become part of the solution. And remember that these stories are positive, right? They're really positive images of us as citizens. And so when public perception changes, it influences public policy. And so when we see that, you know, when elected officials see that they have constituents that are Muslim, that are women, that are concerned about, you know, things that affect their children around education or their health care, they start to pay attention and they start to listen to us. And so we aren't just like this voting block, we become part of mainstream civic engagement activities, again, making our communities safer and healthier and welcoming and belonging to everyone.
And I may be getting ahead of the conversation a little bit here, but I just want to make sure we cover this part. How can allies support this work that you're doing and continue moving forward with this?
Yeah, so you're doing an excellent job of this because you have this platform and you've invited me to come share my story. And so I would tell allies, be like Mike. And I don't know if you're into basketball, but I grew up in Chicago, and so I'm a big Bulls fan. And so we would always talk about be like Mike, which was Michael Jordan. But in this case, you know, open up your platforms, you know, invite Muslim women, invite diversity and different perspectives to be on your platforms. You know, look around and see who's missing from the table, which voice needs to be present, and use your critical thinking skills. If you see a story that just does not resonate with you, that is perpetuating a stereotype, call it out. You know, I see often that we just share stories over and over thinking that this is the narrative. And it takes a lot for stopping that perpetuated stereotype. And so finally, just, you know, participate in telling your own story. I mean, everybody has a story to share, and we will only be able to reclaim our voices and our power if we step up and share our lived experiences and listen empathetically to those around us.
It's quite possibly the biggest compliment I've received. So thank you for saying that. I want to point out to the folks, I will be linking a link to the page that lists the Sheroes, and I want to talk about the Sheroes. There's too many for me to list right here, so I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing some specific examples of stories you've highlighted that were, I mean, they're all noteworthy, but that were particularly that you want to share.
Yeah. There are quite a few. I love all the stories because, you know, we do a lot in just curating the right Shero and the right story, but also we rely heavily on our community to guide us and show us and introduce us to these wonderful women. And so one of our favorite stories is Valerie Shirley. And because she's like a deaf activist, her son was born with meningitis and lost his hearing. And there weren't any culturally affirming resources in her community to help her son. And so instead of just sitting back and like giving up, she really persevered and showed her resilience and actually creating a platform and creating resources to not only help her own son, but also to help the entire community. So she runs an organization called the Minnesota Deaf Community of Muslims, and she just does a phenomenal job of like providing resources to the deaf so that their spiritual needs are met, their physical needs, their you know, professional needs are met, and really to bridge the gap between our community that is hearing and then their community, which is deaf. And so she's been a phenomenal Shero that we've highlighted, but also she just she's really humble, and you know, she's just part of our community. And a second one is Juwaria Jama. We just released her story a couple of weeks ago, and she's our youngest Shero. She's only 17 years old and is a climate justice warrior activist. And, you know, when she talks about how just the intersectionality of like racism and climate change and environmental justice all really intersect, and how it's, you know, Black, Indigenous communities of color that are affected greatly by what is happening to our climate. And also to just showcase, like, you know, youth really, there's a lot we can learn from our young people. They are just so amazing in challenging status quo and really pushing the envelope in terms of creating change in their community. So there's, I think, over 30 profiles that we have on our website that are, you know, illustrations and podcasts and blogs and videos. And so I'd invite all of you to actually check those out. And then if you know of a Muslim woman change maker in your community, feel free to nominate. We always love to learn more. And I know it's shocking. I actually don't know every single Muslim woman in our community, and would love to extend the invitation for you to introduce us to the next Shero.
Great. If anyone knows anyone, I'd encourage you to seek them out and to nominate them using the form on the website if you could. I will, like I said, I will post a link to the Sheroes in the show notes of this show. So there's an important question I want to get to, and this deals with everyone's perception and their lived experience. And so you and I had talked about this earlier, and you mentioned that this is complicated when in many ways it's a barrier, it's an obstacle towards communicating and telling stories, even amongst the community in Minneapolis. Can you share with us a little bit more about how people's lived experiences plays into this conversation, and how people can, you know, take a step back maybe and listen to someone with another lived experience?
Yeah. I think the hardest part of storytelling and sharing your own personal story is just the vulnerability that surrounds it, right? Because you don't know how others will react to it. And so when you're putting yourself out there, you're really like risking how people will perceive your story. And so when we first began Rise, you know, shocking, we saw a lot of just challenges, people that were really challenging us on why is it necessary to have this? Why do Muslim women feel that they are being silenced, or that they need a platform to have their voice amplified. And you would think that we were hearing this from non-Muslims, or you would think that you were hearing this from Muslim men, but we were surprised to see that there were quite a lot of just opposition from like Muslim women. And that was surprising to me, because I had assumed that my lived experience was a shared one amongst everyone. And that wasn't the case, right? So there are absolutely Muslim women who aren't oppressed, who have privilege and have had the ability to live their best lives because they've had these wonderful resources, and they've had, people surrounding them that supported them and amplifying them. And that lived experience, unfortunately, isn't the norm. And so to help people like that really understand that there is still a lot of obstacles that Muslim women face, especially with like a triple barrier, right? Not only do we have this gender barrier, we also have a religious barrier and a racial one. So when this trifecta of identities and their challenges come together, some of those isms are really difficult to navigate. And so to help others understand that perhaps your race helped you get ahead, it may not have been the same for somebody else. Perhaps you were surrounded by men and women who really supported you and helped you get to where you are. That's not the case for everyone. And so really, to help people understand, your lived experience is absolutely valid, but there are also other experiences that you should be willing to listen to and understand that perspective.
And that's a really important point. And I was surprised to hear that as well when you mentioned that to me earlier. And it seems to me like you've been really effective at communicating. And I just wanted to see, do you have any advice for someone who may be watching this, who may feel isolated or alone in their community and is trying to communicate with their community about what they're going through or what their demographic is experiencing? Do you have any advice for them?
That's a tough question, because there's never like a silver bullet to that, right? And what I have learned is you have to be very authentic in your storytelling. And sometimes I have seen that, we use more positive and asset-based language. So instead of perpetuating sort of a victim mentality, we're big about survivor, right? How did we survive that situation? How did we survive? And how do we continue to really navigate moving forward? And so be authentic in sharing your story. And also, I think we have this, we always have this goal of like wanting to change the extreme and forgetting about the movable middle. And so you're not going to win overnight convincing and changing people's hearts and minds who are at the opposite end of where you are. You are going to have to focus on what we call the movable middle, who don't have all the information, but are really open to listening and trying to understand a different perspective. And that's where you really gain momentum. And movements aren't built overnight, and they're not built like from 0 to 1 million people also in a second, right? Think about who you can affect one person at a time. Sometimes your win is just convincing and explaining your perspective and your story to that one person, because that one person will then go on and share your story with somebody else. And that domino effect is a lot more effective and important and has a lot of impact versus like, trying to move masses.
And that's evidenced by the impact you have had is speaks for itself. And so I just, it's inspiring and amazing to see that in action. And is there anything on the horizon, anything you're working on or that Rise is working on that you're particularly excited about that you want to share with us?
Yeah. You know, Mike, last year we actually wanted to take our storytelling to the next level by creating sort of this like short documentary about Muslim women in action. And unfortunately with COVID, we couldn't. And we had started the year off filming a group of students at a high school who actually came to the Capitol with us and talked to their legislators about bullying and harassment. And then we had another person from college, a college-age student who was an election judge, and you know, she was really getting involved in her community and in the election cycle. And then we told another story of a woman who was part of her caucus process and became a precinct chair. And what was amazing about these stories was showing like the diversity of who Muslim women are. And we're not talking just about like how they practice their faith, but like their socioeconomic backgrounds, their education, their professionals. They are, you know, from different ethnicities and different ages and backgrounds. And we really were excited to like film that. And then everything came to a screeching halt. And so we're hoping that this year we can sort of pick that back up, because those are really great stories to share with people, to inspire them that, you know what, organizing actually works, right? Don't just sit back and not do anything. You know, storytelling helps people, you know, convinces them to take action. And that's what we were hoping to do with our documentary. So we're hoping by the time everybody gets their vaccines and COVID rates fall, that we'll be back in community recording and learning more and following these wonderful women around and really showcasing like the change that they're making. So, you know, more things to come.
Well, I really look forward to that, and it's a shame that you had to pause it for now for the pandemic, but it's going to be worth the wait, and I can't wait to see what it turns out to look like. My final question to you is, and this is something I like just to ask folks, is what's a question you wish I was asking, and what's your response to it?
Okay, now I'm going to flip this on you because this is something. So I get this question a lot of like, who was your Shero or who was your mentor when you were growing up? And that question is really tough for me, Mike, because when I was a little girl, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. And to find a mentor that resonated with me took a really long time to find. And, you know, I'm a child of immigrant parents. And if you know how immigrant families operate when they first come over to the United States, they are very much secluded. They only know their family members and extended families. And so I was surrounded by not only my mom, but my wonderful aunts and a couple older cousins. And my mentor when I was a kid was my cousin Astra. And it was because she was so cool, right? Like she could drive, she had her own car, she had makeup, and I was just like so much in awe at her. But what I realized was like she really treated me like a younger sister. And that's what I think has really spurred me in establishing Rise, because we always talk about a sisterhood. And I want this sisterhood to be a group of just mentors and amazing coaches and women who other women can look up to, that other little girls can see and feel like they can do something and have a meaningful impact in their lives. And so when I get this question of who is my mentor, I can now today say it is all these women that we see in our Muslim Sheroes of Minnesota project.
We had a comment in the chat room from our CEO Ken, and he said brilliant response, and I have to agree. So, Nausheena, it's been an honor, and we've reached the end of our episode, and we're going to transition now into just chatting. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your story, and inspiring others to have impact. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate being here with you.
All right. Hold on one second. We'll be right back.